in which we are going to share with all of you the main results of our recent research on e-learning in Peru. At the ISIL, we do a lot of applied research in order to discover new trends and mainly to help professionals make better decisions. In that sense, researching online education in a context like the one we live in was and is necessity and a great opportunity. We are very happy to have Keith Pond with us. Keith is EOCCS director, one of the most prestigious online education certification. We are very proud to be part of EOCCS since last year, after reaching the most rigorous standard in online education and become the only Peruvian educational institution to achieve it. Well, thank you all for joining us, and I will leave you with Jimena to start the presentation.
Thank you, Jose Miguel, for the presentation. Keith, welcome. And we're very glad to have you. I'm going to start sharing the results so we can discuss it. So just to confirm, everybody can see my presentation, and also Keith, you are with us.
Yes, you're ready, Jimé.
Okay, sure. Then we'll start this presentation of the study. We call it E-Learning in Peru, Experiences and Expectations. Just to give you a very small brief of like who we are. We are education pioneers in Peru. We actually, ISIL is located in Lima. We have several campuses, and we are the first Peruvian technological institute created with the career of computer science. We have plus 35 years of experience, plus 20,000 alumni. And our academic offer goes from areas like business, communication, marketing, technology, and hospitality and tourism. And also we have an area of executive education and in-company services. As Jose Miguel was explaining, we really take a very good care and importance of quality in higher education. We have 3 professional careers from our school that grants bachelor degrees, and we have 24 careers from our technical institute. It means like a technical bachelor. We have accreditations from our local accreditor like CINEACE, from ACBSP for business career, ABET for software development career, ACFA for hotel management, and yeah, we mentioned EOCCS, and Keith knows this very well.
Absolutely, Jimena, it's great to be invited along here. And for those in the audience who haven't heard of EOCCS, we're European based, but with a global reach, and looking for the best quality online management education we can find. And as was mentioned earlier, ISIL got that certification last year, where we looked at a suite of 5 marketing courses. And it was a great pleasure to be associated with them then, and it's a great pleasure to be here today.
Great. So to move forward and start talking about the study, we just want to let you know that in this presentation, the e-learning concept for the purpose of this research, e-learning and online education are going to be treated as synonyms, and we refer as this experience for students in online education that have a learning experience by which they interact with content, activities, tutors, and online platforms and tools. Just to give you an idea of the design of this research, we focus on the Lima Metropolitana, Peru's capital, user. From the sample, we have over 700 cases, people that were part of this research. We have as is a probabilistic study, an adequate error, like 95% confidence level. And this study research was prepared during February this year, but you will see in the results that it's referred to the online experience. Just to let you give you more details of the demographic profile, we have like an equal female and male participants, the different age groups from 18 up to 35 years old. Here, well, we talk about economic or socioeconomic levels, ABC, also known as high, middle, and low classes. And regarding to the education level of the participants, we have like a PhD, master, but mainly according to the characteristics of our like sample and like our local demographic profile, mostly university and technical like participant, students that completed or are in process of following these programs.
Can I just say at this stage, it is so good to see some good, purposive, representative research in this area. This is a fast-moving area, and we really do have to keep tabs on what our audience is telling us. And I commend you for entering into this survey as you have.
Sure. And just to give you like a first overview of the results we're gonna like discuss, from all these participants, almost 80% had like an online education experience during 2020. This is a positive results. And we're gonna start like going deeper on these results. So let's see, Keith, the first section of the research that is a general view of higher education. Certainly, and it's clear that the year 2020 has propelled online education in all its shapes. But as we see in these results, especially when we talk about professional or technical careers, as we see like the purple bars, actually this 2018 was a study very similar we prepared about e-learning, where these type of programs were not like so consuming in an online modality, and 2020 certainly accelerated this process. And some interpretation we have is that, yeah, well, students in their careers firstly had to follow their programs, but in any case, if it was something that they needed to do, the important thing to know is how did it go?
And can I say this absolutely follows global trends. We see online education, if we can suspend our thinking about the pandemic at the moment, worrying as it is, but these are really show the demand that students have, that delegates and professionals have for these smaller, short courses, upskilling and reskilling, and sort of just-in-time training that, you know, clearly full 3 or 4 year degree courses and diplomas, you know, there has to be a lot of planning in that. But for the short courses, yeah, absolutely, the data show that you've got a good picture, a good similar picture in Peru as you have in the rest of the world.
Yes, and talking about these similar pictures, what we have next show us that students in higher education, especially if like from careers and masters, show a high satisfaction level. We see the top 2 box result is among very good and good. And it's something that is also kind of surprising in a positive way, because even though what I was saying, this was something they had to go through, as we are gonna see later, some results of our previous research said that they found many disadvantages in online education. Do you think, or according to your experience, like this kind of like stigma or idea happening with other institutions or countries you have worked with?
Absolutely. There is, the title of your whole survey here about expectations, I think it explains a lot. People have a picture in their minds of how education is going to be delivered, how their course is going to happen. And online typically is not a big part of people's history in that. Increasingly, it's becoming so. But yes, there is a feeling that it's the quality of face-to-face is perceived to be higher than online. And that's simply not true, but it is the perception. But again, that's an excellent finding that so many people, once they were introduced to it, said, yeah, actually, this is pretty good. And it's their expectations, I feel, that are the big determining factor there.
Yes, and if we go like deeper on this small minority that didn't find this experience or the performance of their institution like very good, I mean, they consider it was bad or very bad, we asked them if they would consider changing from institution because they didn't assess their institution properly. And we found that 72%, even though they didn't have the experience they would have expected, wouldn't change from institution. How can we read these results? Because as we were discussing like before, in education, the service and the relationship is not as when you have like a internet company, like you change because you don't like or something is wrong. Like it's more like a long-term stake for the student and also for the institution.
Very much so, and a lot of research in schools that have a lot of experience in online education begins to focus around this whole idea of a relationship, a longer term relationship. And for many, many business schools, particularly around the world, the keeping hold of your alumni, keeping in touch with them and being able to offer them continuing development in the future is so important. So it's good to see that the one interpretation of this data is that actually there's an affinity, a relationship with an institution. And yes, students will forgive if it's not not exactly according to their expectations every time, because they gain so much more from that knowledge of the institution itself. So building up a good track record. This isn't a transaction. This isn't the internet provider or car insurance provider. It's a relationship that works both ways.
Sure, it could be like a lifelong relationship with undergraduate, graduate, and you can be a lifelong learner. And if you're happy with this institution, they can accompany your whole life. So to go a bit deeper on the results, and even though they wouldn't change, but we also asked them, okay, but if you were to change because, well, you have the chance, which factors would they assess and what would they prioritize? And for this group of participants that, okay, would assess changing finally, we found that over half, 57%, would prioritize the learning management system over a prepared and updated faculty or like technological tools, labs, or services. And also, just to have a better discussion of this concept, we were talking that learning management system, that is something very attached to the academic world. And as we were discussing Keith before, like many of the LMS, learning management systems, were created and designed before the pandemic. So before the needs that we have today, that is fully online, totally digital, and almost no like face-to-face interaction. So this is interesting because what we are seeing here is that students want a proper learning management system, but not a management system that the institution wants thought for the teacher or for managing their own needs. It's just for the interaction, for learning, for like communication. So something more, if you can put it in simple words, similar to a social media or other platforms like students use?
Yes, there's two layers here. One is, getting the right LMS that is able to be flexible like a social media, but also have the rigor of a schedule and a taught element. But also it's how the institution uses it. That there are some huge global LMSs around. I shan't name any, otherwise I'll have to name them all, won't I? But two different institutions can use them quite differently. There's no one way. And I think fundamentally, if you are digital first, and that's your thinking, the assumptions you build into how the design of the LMS works are very different than if you are face-to-face first, because you really have to think about how are my students going to use the system and then structure the learning in that way.
Yes, and just to go more about like digital and like this type of experience, now we're gonna go to the next section of the research that is specifically for courses and platforms. These they're also part of this online education ecosystem. And when we talk about platforms, we mean like platforms like Coursera, EDX, more local platforms like Creana, like you have open education with usually shorter programs. So to give you a general view, and we will go deeper in the results later, courses were the most preferred type of online education follow. And we found this especially among millennials. So just to go deeper, I want to go to the next slide to show you like about these preferences. And when we ask this type of user, like what are the most important factors to choose, like to study an online course, they prioritize the certification, then the price, and on third place, the teacher's prestige. And for us, this is something very interesting because they highly value not only the type of program they're following, but that this type of program, that is an online course, something a much more short program, give you a proof of their knowledge, of their skills, of what they have studied and invested their time on. So how do you find these results kits that are like specifically for Lima users, but can you also like see similar trends from your experience?
I think it's very interesting to see that certification, the qualification itself, as being one of the biggest factors. There's something else to say about that as well, because within Lima, within Peru, I can imagine, yes, that is important because the qualifications are recognized within the locality and valued and used in Peru. But the conversation takes us beyond that. How are they going to be recognized outside of the country? How are they going to be recognized regionally or even globally? And that's a big conversation that some of the big tech companies are having at the moment with micro-credentials. And I think that's something that if you do get certifications and qualifications, there will be some that will be of good quality and recognize good quality at national level that will have an international footprint. But if they are not of good quality and there's no measure of quality nationally, then they may not be recognized internationally. So it is an important thing to recognize that students, delegates are looking for a good qualification that's meaningful. And that's, and price is secondary to them. And I think that's important as well. I like the idea as well that modality, how the course is rolled out is a big factor. And I think that echoes what we were saying before about the millennials particularly. They like flexibility, they like options, they like choice. And so how a course is run and how assessment, particularly on a course, is done, it's not one timetable, it's my timetable, my individual timetable for learning that suits my needs. And that's again what our markets are increasingly asking for.
Yes, and if we go to the next result, as you were saying, that people like hopes to get a certification that is recognized, that has quality, we can also see why are they taking this type of online courses, and we have like the big majority indicating they do it because they want to update their knowledge. They look for new work opportunities. So it's important connecting what you said before with this result, that quality is very important, and the quality has like a holistic view from the content, from the institution, from the platform, because it's fully online in these platforms, and even from the learning methodology you propose in these type of courses. So this is something like we are like seeing more and more, like people are paying more attention for quality, as you say. However, if we look below in these slides, we also see a new trend that is arising, that also people follow these courses in platforms because they enjoy learning new things and just to nurture their hobbies. So this is something that shows us that even though professional goals are important, also there are other trends that are starting to happen in education. Well, instead of streaming a movie or doing other activities, now that I spend most of the time inside, because here still in Peru we have still many restrictions, people start to find in these courses a different way to spend their time.
I think that's such an important element of the design of any course, is that opportunity for peers to talk to peers, peers to talk to tutors, students to tutors, and things like working together, because hidden within those things, the social skills, the teamwork skills, they run through everything. And so it is, again, the way in which things are delivered and what people seek from it, not just the knowledge, although there are lots of things to be updated on. And so I can see why that's at the top of the tree.
So another thing we are like starting to look, and we were discussing it before, is not only like the continuous update and also enjoying and nurturing your hobbies, but what the user expects in terms of duration. And we see a clear trend that is courses of less and less hours. We actually asked them the duration of time of the courses they studied in 2020, the online courses. And as you can see, more than half of the participants are studying courses of less than 12 hours and 39% less than 6 hours. And here again, we see what you were saying, Keith, that people need something that adapts to their needs. And sometimes when you have like a long program ahead, you think even more, and it takes longer for you to make a decision to study something that long instead of having something shorter that seems much more achievable.
Indeed, again, this is, we could be in Peru, we could be in Europe, we could be in Asia, and we see the same things, that study needs to fit in with people's busy lifestyles, with their commitments to caring, to family, to work, and those shorter bursts, if you like, they will be more in demand. But it raises a problem, doesn't it? It raises a problem for educators, because just stringing together half a dozen courses does not make necessarily the best learning opportunity. So you really have to think about how they add together to make a whole program, that how they build on each other. And again, that's important to recognize the difference between the individual course and subject and, say, a degree, which probably those are the 16% more than 25 hours. That would be something closer to a part of a degree course, quite a substantial element. But for those that want to upskill, smaller chunks that fit into their lifestyle is definitely what we're seeing.
And just to, maybe I'm gonna go with this a bit forward to what we have ahead, is like we are seeing in these platforms and in general that partner with universities, we see three main characteristics: that these courses or programs are stackable, they are flexible, and they are exchangeable. So they help you build, and maybe you can even like have recognition from different universities. If you pile them together, you have, like, as you were saying, a whole certification. So it helps the person get that recognition that they are expecting.
Absolutely. I think the whole concept of the internet and how that helps networking gives greater possibilities for that, picking and mixing courses from different universities. Previously, it needs individual universities to partner to have joint schemes. But if we do get to a situation where those micro-credentials can be validated, then you can build up quite a bank of knowledge from different places at different times.
And something we were also discussing, and is that positive, because there is no better way of showing that something is worth, is when you see the user actually paying for it. And in 2020, asking them about if they're paid for the online course they took, we see that almost 80% of the user paid for the online course, and just 22% took it for free. So this is also another way of measuring and seeing in a tangible way that people is valuing more and more this type of certification, these courses, and also it's an indirect way of recognizing their quality, because if you don't believe in something, or you have maybe a bad experience even for free, you wouldn't pay for it.
And typically the costs of courses are quite low, so that this is something that really widens the scope of higher education into those communities and those parts of society that haven't benefited from higher education before, sort of exclude themselves because they can't commit 3 years to a degree, or they can't find a large amount of money to start it. So that is encouraging, certainly encouraging for private business schools to know that that's a trend.
Yeah, I agree with what you say, because starting, like the cost of a start, if you can say it, for a longer program is bigger, so you cannot do it. But with something small, you can start almost wherever you want if you are working. But for a master or a career, you have to think about it like longer, because you will be committed for more years. Like there's no chance that you can stop, and the implication will be harder on you.
Indeed.
So we have discussed up to now about the trends in the courses, how the user are perceiving their satisfaction in higher education in general. But talking about these platforms, we see that even though these online courses are offered in by different providers, this year platforms are the preferred provider. I'm gonna go to the next slide to show you clear these results, comparing it with our 2018 research, because just back then, online platforms, as you can see on the left side, were on the second option. First, we had universities, then institutes, and specialized companies. And 2020 has changed stuff. Online platforms, as I was saying, are the preferred option. Then we have more specialized educational institutions. They also they have more preference now. And we see like a similar level in universities and institutes. So we see that this ecosystem is changing the way it's working. There is a different preference by the users, but also we see that many of these online platforms are not actually like being the ones that authorship their courses, but they're just the mean for the universities and institutes to offer their courses. Like I was saying, Coursera, EDX, and so and so.
Yeah, and you have to understand the business model of those platforms. As you say, they don't have the knowledge base themselves, they partner. But what they can add to that partnership with universities, with higher education providers, is a reach. And what I found as well, and naming no names of courses or identifying them, there is an element of quality assurance that, if it's a course from this particular provider, you can be reassured that it has gone through a process. It's not just something where you're relying on one university. It's gone through a process at the university. It's gone through a process at the platform to ensure that it is of a good standard. And in EOCCS, we have certified courses, MOOCs, things as small as free MOOCs that recognize that. The big issue, which many universities perhaps naturally don't get or don't have the skills for, is managing that relationship between the university and the platform. And I think that's a real key, that if you can manage that interaction with the platform, everyone wins. If, say, the platform doesn't have that backing of a university with a good level of research and knowledge provision, then it is weaker. If the university doesn't have a good platform that's reassuring to students, it is weaker. Together they can be strong, but they have to manage that relationship very closely.
And as many of the participants, the audience here that is listening to this webinar is related to the academic or education world somehow, what type of, as we were discussing before, like recommendation or suggestion would you think that these institutions would could follow, or from the platforms that are more digital, maybe like have these results show us that they have been able to improve and scale faster? So do you see something that, even though they are not the same, we can like take as a lesson?
I think it is that really sort of creating a good relationship. And I've got one particular institution in mind that is partnering with a very big global platform and provider. And some of the elements that the university didn't have in the first place were things like learning designers. Now, this is something that, it's not an academic, it's not a technical person, but it's a person who is experienced in instructional skills, who can speak the academic language, know what the academics want to achieve, but also knows the possibilities and limitations of the technology that's being used, and is able to make the best decisions. So those, where that is recognized, that these people can be private consultants, better if they're part of the university setup, that they are talking the language of the platforms, they know, and they can influence how those platforms develop, because the platforms themselves, they started, 2014, we had the year of the MOOC. They've grown, they've learned, and they continue to learn because of that interaction. And so they'll continue to sort of present a far, a better environment to learn than individual universities could do by themselves. It is no mystery really why, when you look at the universities that were behind edX and Coursera and Future Learn, which is a British platform. But those universities are very, very strong in their teaching skills, in their instructional values, and they spawned, they gave birth to these platforms in the first place. So you can see where they're, it really is that understanding. When they reach out to another partner, you do need that understanding of actually how does the structure, the design, and the knowledge base and the instruction go together.
Yes, and something else I take from what you explained as Keith, and it's very interesting, and it will be like, I know, a whole conversation, is the new roles these platforms, relationships, universities are creating. You were saying like learning designers, more like teachers with more digital skills. So also this new ecosystem is also creating new roles and new skills we have to gain. So it's something like we can discuss in another webinar.
Yes, indeed.
So to move forward, now we want to give you a general perception of online education with the results we have regarding careers, online courses, masters, everything that we have shown you. We also want to encourage to ask our questions in the chat. We're receiving some, but as we're gonna finish this last section, we also would like to know your opinion and in general, any doubt you could have. So to talk about the general perception of online education in 2020, we found that 8 out of 10 participants consider that the interaction in online education for the experience they had is good or very good. We can see the top 2 boxes, the interaction with the students and interaction with teachers, score like with an 8%, 80% in average. So we start with this result. Why? Because in the previous research, actually the same participants appointed that the interaction was one of the disadvantages of online education. And now after they tried for this last year, 2020, they assess this as something positive. And something I want to just give to add context is that, many institutions had to learn on the way, but also it's something positive because we know that 2020, for many people, interaction in educational environment was not the only thing affected. We were affected in interaction at at all of our levels. For example, in Peru, we had like 3 months of a full lockdown for everyone. So this is something also positive to see, besides other results. As you can see, that they value a highly material and content, learning outcomes, the platforms, and the assessment system. So how do you find these results, Keith?
Very interesting. And one thing that we've found with now almost 6 years of EOCCS reviews of schools around the world, that this begins to be developed more and more, that being built into courses, we have far more thinking about interaction, far more collaborative learning. And this is something that this platform we're on now, Zoom or MS Teams, and platforms like that have enabled, people to work together in a group. And can I say, I mean, thinking from an business undergraduate perspective, one of the things is not just the knowledge base in a degree, but also developing skills they're going to use in the workplace. So working collaboratively, we all do that in all of our workspaces. There's very few people who can say they do everything alone. We work with teams. And so this is something that really has come on well in the last 12 months. The technology has enabled more interaction. The students themselves have become more relaxed with that interaction. And, they see it, as you said before, Jimena, akin to social media, that they see it as something that they are quite comfortable with. But the important thing there is that 83%, the interaction with teachers. So we may have teachers ranging across from, recently graduated people going into teaching to some very experienced and older members of staff. But what they need to do is ensure that they interact with students or have plenty of opportunities to interact, and not just in a sort of a one-way conversation like as a lecture can be, but actually in discussion. It takes a risk as an academic to do that for the first time, but the rewards are huge. And again, we're seeing that develop as the technology develops, as people develop their willingness to communicate and network in this way.
Yes, about what you say, Keith, I think this result, if we connect back to the one of the first slides where we saw that even though some students wouldn't have the best experience, they wouldn't change from their institution. I think the interaction has actually something to do, because that's part of the relationship, that's part of the loyalty, and maybe the general experience wasn't that good, but finally who you see face-to-face, or I mean like on the screen, is the teacher, and that interaction actually helps you build that a relationship, and you wouldn't change. So that's very important.
Indeed.
So we have already discussed about this, but just to summarize, we see that millennials are the biggest consumer of online courses and also have the highest satisfaction levels. So as we were talking before, this has something to do, as we were saying, with the modality, with how the certification is provided, with, again, like how these programs are flexible enough and convenient enough for them to follow them, because they might be working, they can only study at the weekend. So all these lessons are starting like to give us hints about how these, like in general, longer programs, or how we call it here, like regulated programs, like careers or masters, could start like having these attributes and creating this like stackable education like program.
Yes, indeed. And there's a point here that my experience has been for my university going around the world talking to potential undergraduates and postgraduates to come to our courses. And very often you hear, the opportunities within my own country are not that great. Therefore, I want to get out and sort of work as a global worker. And the millennials have got this. Their world is so open. They know about everything else that's happening in the rest of the world. And online education can actually provide them with that lifeline to other parts of the world. In a way, we don't know what's going to happen. It might encourage them to leave Peru, possibly, which would be a sadness for the Peruvian economy and society. But it might encourage them to stay, because they can actually get that international interaction and that collaborative working, and not actually have to go elsewhere to get it. The opportunities open up. We don't know what the future is going to be, but what we can do is put those opportunities in young people's ways, so that they can see that they can gain from that. Online education isn't a panacea, it's not a cure for everything, but it does have particular advantages if when we design courses, we make sure that they give those opportunities.
Yes, I totally agree with you, Keith, that online education in general is a way for people to get educated and have a much more access for education that sometimes was determined by where they live, if they had a campus close, or if the campus it was close to them was actually had the programs or careers like the student wanted to follow. So yeah, as you say, this has like open opportunities for everyone. So talking about opportunities and what the user expects, we asked them, if you could study a permanent modality, which one would you choose? All these participants that had like an online education experience, and they would want to course, excuse me, and if they would want to do it again. So we found that 29% will do it 100% on campus, and 7% fully online. But then we found like the middle result you can see, 64%, a mix between on campus and online. And in general, first, just interpreting this result is that user in general, not only in education, just to have a wider perspective, these days want, as we would say, the best of both worlds. Online advantages, like quick and intuitive digital solutions, but also the offline benefits that has to do with face-to-face interaction and networking in person, the mobility and going somewhere where you feel part of. So what they say is called like a phygital experience, physical and digital. So how do you see this? Because it really is like a very big world in these hybrid models.
It is. I think it just underlines that we're human beings, we're social animals, and we do want that. And that actually not every university can offer sort of a complete campus experience. Not every university can offer a completely online experience, but careful planning and design can actually help those students be part of a society, and a campus-based population is very, very valuable, because there's so much learning happens outside of the classroom. And it's only when you've got the ability to discuss things and meet people in a social environment that those conversations, those discussions take place. So I can see that there's, the hardcore note. I want what I've always had, the face-to-face, I know where I am with that. The others who maybe can't travel or don't want to travel want it online, but most of us want a mix. And I've seen some very good universities do a lot of the journey online, and then for a short period, a concentrated period, have a sort of a summer school or a block of time where the students all congregate at the university and enjoy the campus environment, as well as some delivery, some instruction, and then they go back and in their own homes and benefit from the online again. So the designs are as many as there are universities, I'm sure, of how to put those together. But it is important to recognize that it's not just about the study, it's about that overarching student experience as well that students look for.
Yes, I agree with you. And just to give us a bit more of your opinion, how do you think, as a personal opinion, that educational institutions thinking ahead of this dual reality could start like thinking and designing this experience? Like what kind of recommendations would you need from your experience with EOCCS, the institutions you certify and know of?
Well, coming from the EOCCS perspective, the very first thing we ask any institution when we review them is about the institution itself, its strategy, its mission. And you'll recognize around the world there are universities that, there is a very traditional mission. There is a very traditional way of doing things, and the campus is all important. So, and maybe they are very research intensive universities rather than teaching focused universities. And that will change how they might design courses. Running through it though, is not just responding to demand, it's actually how can we be as a university distinctive in what we provide? How can anyone looking at our courses choosing our university, how is that going to be different to anyone else? And it is, it's based on actually what is the university trying to promote in its mission and its vision. And sometimes that is an international reach. Sometimes that is a very practical professional reach. So there's a lot of corporate interaction and a lot of interaction with the professions. Sometimes that is more research-based, theoretical, and that, you know, so online education can fit all of those spaces, but everyone wants to be a little bit different. And that's what we find. We have a huge variety of institutions, public business schools in state universities, private business schools, private providers, and they're all got different directions. They're going different strategies. Online certainly supports strategies of growth, because these are, you know, this is very often scalable. You can increase the number of students quite readily, whereas on a campus-based experience, that may be down to actually the physical space you have. And it might take years to build new lecture theatres or accommodation. And so this is something where a university wants to grow, especially grow internationally. Online is a good way to go. And again, that's what we're finding with many of our institutions.
Thank you, Keith. And just to go to the last slide to show you the final results. As you might remember, we said that from this research, from all the sample, 20% didn't have an online education experience in 2020. So we asked them if they would participate in any type of online education program. And we found like a very polarized result. 49% wouldn't do it and 51% would do it. So this is very interesting. And just to explain you a bit more, like these results in general can have many implications. For example, we have barriers for the consumption of online education, but these barriers, at least here in Peru or Lima, might also be related with the e-commerce and online shopping, because this is something that has arise with the pandemic, what many users were not used to really paying online. There is some sort of not trust. So how do you see this result, Keith?
I think that's a very good analogy, comparison with, say, retailers. You know, around the world, high streets and shopping centers and shopping malls, you know, they have been the way in which we have shopped. And it's not just the pandemic that has changed that, it has accelerated it. And so I can see, yeah, you know, people are more comfortable accepting the technology into their homes, comfortable communicating in that way. I'll give you a very personal example. My mother, bless her, she's 88, and she has done this last year more Zoom calls to family and WhatsApp calls than she's ever done before. You know, that is, and so, you know, she's very good in picking up new things and using them. But I think that's just the human spirit. You know, we will try new things out. Don't want to miss out on the opportunities. And I'm sure that 49%, they're willing to be persuaded if the offer is right. They're saying no now, but they may be persuaded.
Yes, and also something that this research make us think, and in general with online education, as we were discussing before, that is a way to open more opportunities for people. What happens, in your opinion, for the people that is already disadvantaged, that maybe during the pandemic did not have lost their job, they didn't have a proper education background, and they're struggling to go to this like more online world where they will have to study online and maybe work online, like how we can through education help them like be more part of this changing technology adoption from your opinion?
Well, it's just going in the direction we're going. We can't control what state players do. Governments very often can come in, governments that are in control and have responsibility for the educational system. They can provide equipment if that's the barrier for people. But it is something that perhaps individual institutions can't, sort of just hand out iPads or Surface machines to and laptops to every student. It just wouldn't be financially worthwhile. But it is a barrier. Having said that, technology is becoming cheaper and cheaper. And one thing we haven't mentioned, we're talking about e-learning and online learning. There's a lot now, when it's boiled down, can be delivered mobile friendly. And that is something that, is far more accessible than, say, a laptop or a computer. But, if things can be delivered on mobile, which is, again, a very different structure of thing, then that becomes more accessible to more people.
Yes, well, this is the last slide, and it's been a pleasure to be with you, Keith. Now I'm gonna read some of the questions of the participants so we can also answer their interest. So for example, somebody asked us, in a recent project before COVID-19 lockdown, they found that users would value national accreditation above international recognitions because they will be more likely to lead to a job. For example, in Peru, just to give you more context, there is like a very rigorous accreditation and something called a licenciamiento, or the accreditation licensing. And they found before the pandemic that this was more like valued. Do you think that regulators and these systems can have that weight that can even like shape how the students value these certifications or credentials?
I certainly hope so, because that's exactly what EFMD and EOCCS wants to be. Whilst we are very Europe-based at the moment, and most of our members are in Europe, we begin to reach out globally. And if we're known for, the best quality, and that is the imprint of EFMD accreditations and this EOCCS certification, that hopefully that becomes more recognized. It becomes more recognized when more institutions like ISIL participate and gain certification, and when awareness of what we do is raised through seminars like this. So yes, I think that can happen. The regulators, the providers. One thing though, Jimena, it's something of a sort of national pride. That governments want to be able to control things, and if we're talking globally, if we're talking, qualifications being recognized in other parts of the world, even in other countries within our own region, that takes quite a lot of foresight from the national regulators to say, yes, this is what we're going to try and achieve. A lot of negotiation with people, so you get that equivalence. But dare I say, technology might be the solution there. There are people considering using blockchain to validate international qualifications. So rather than have to do your research and think about what institution was that from, who validated it, on the blockchain, you can find out exactly that. That is, I think, an idea at the moment rather than a reality. But it is something that I say, that system could help us with to make these national and international certifications and qualifications far more well known and valued.
Yes, and talking about the international arena, what's your knowledge or idea about like the global job market perception about online education? Like, are they willing to hire more like undergraduates or professionals having followed these programs? What can you tell us? Because here in Peru, this is something as before the pandemic, not so developed, like having like these online careers fully, or they were not so massive. So what can you say about like your general experience around the world?
Well, the focus is always on young people in their first degree, undergraduates, so the millennials, because they have a whole career ahead of them and these skills need to be embedded. But increasingly and I can speak for the UK and Western Europe, there's a bigger focus on reskilling. As old industries die out, old skills become less valuable, new skills are needed. And it is that facility of being able to work online, to be able to facilitate discussions online. One of the trends we've seen in business schools is that they begin to build up a good research capability and teaching capability in information science, big data analysis for business purposes. And that's something that 10 years ago, you wouldn't have seen that as being a big part of business schools. But now it is. There are opportunities there for people who can manipulate and analyze those big data streams that come off the back of courses. They come off the back of transactions through Amazon or the different retail platforms. They come from Google, and that's the sort of information that is going to help. And they're the sort of jobs there are in the future, I think, are those, and they're highly skilled jobs, but of data analysis for business purposes.
Thank you, Keith. I also want to read another question from the public, and I'll just read it out loud. It says, I work for an international NGO that helps low-fee schools to grow around the world. I work in the Latin region, specifically in Peru. One of the topics we discussed is the necessity of giving them valid certification. Is there any way we can validate our courses for the schools with any institution around the world? This is more like a recommendation or suggestion you will have for them.
I think I'd need to know a lot more about it. But what we found when we designed EOCCS, and we started doing this 8 years ago, we had a look around the world to see, well, what is there? What of the, especially the business school accreditors, who's doing online accreditation? And what we found that there was a divide. There was AACSB and ABCSP and these organizations that looked at the traditional business schools. AMBER was another one. Up until about 3 years ago, AMBER for MBAs had not accredited an online MBA, and yet we know they exist and they're very successful in different places. They have now done so, one at Birmingham University in the UK. So there was that divide. And then there was a whole other side, distance learning universities, online universities, open universities very often in the Western sphere. So government universities that were specifically built to ensure that those from lower income groups, those that needed that flexibility, could access higher education. Now, to my mind, nothing has brought those two areas of expertise together yet. So, I would say if you are looking for bodies to accredit, there'd be some in the distance learning field, great. There'd be some in the traditional business school field. And we designed EOCCS to be focused on courses, but one that bridged that gap. that we could actually take the expertise from online and distance learning and the experience we have with traditional business schools and marry the two together. There are limitations what EOCCS does, but again, I've not come across other bodies that are as focused on online education as we are.
Thank you, Keith. To have one last question. We discussed about like how the institutions should change and adapt and learn to be more able to act in this and deliver in this digital and more online world. What type of roles do you start seeing to arise in the educational institutions like universities or institutes that help to start designing, delivering, and preparing this online offer, just to have some idea of the trends that you see abroad that could also start happening here?
Well, I will sum that up, my response to that in that we need culture change. The culture of faculty and academics is pretty similar to the way it's been for many, many centuries. The way in which the role is undertaken. It's only in recent years that has, there's been a demand for more and better teaching, more and better research. And so those institutions that have very successfully entered the online world are those who have said, actually, that model needs to be broken. There is a disruption to that model. Now, not for everybody. There are some big universities with very famous names that will just rely on, well, I'll mention one because it's in the press, say Cambridge University in the UK. Their undergraduate provision and their postgraduate provision, very much traditional in the way it's always been delivered, in the lovely surroundings of Cambridge and the lovely buildings they have. But they're digital, and their digital offering is to on executive education. So, they're able to see that. We need to change the model. We can't do what we've been doing all the time. So success for them is coming through really splitting, not just having one product, which is the teacher teaching, but a range of ways in which their knowledge base and a huge experience and deep knowledge base can be delivered in different ways, in different formats. And that is the success, the flexibility at the institutional level. And that can mean, as I said, change the culture. Universities are led by people who are academics, not necessarily people who are education experts, not necessarily people who are teachers, but academics with research backgrounds. Now that needs to be a bit more diverse so that teaching and good online education becomes as important as research in many places. It is in some, but the more places see those as equals and valued as such. And that can mean, from a management perspective, reward schemes and incentives, that instead of research being the incentive for promotion, it's teaching and designing good teaching and designing good learning environments. So I think that culture change, it will take a long time for many places, but if you start that journey, make sure you're pointed in the right direction.
Thank you, Keith, for this enlightening conversation and discussion about our research. For all the people that has been with us during all the webinar, we want to thank you. We also are showing you the research page of ISIL where you can find this study and many others. And we are glad that you have joined us. And again, Keith, From ISIL, we really appreciate and thank for your participation here. And we'll,
my pleasure.
Yes, it's very interesting to talk to you.
My great pleasure, and I hope that you take the lessons from this survey within ISIL and really reflect on and think about how that helps you to develop in the marketplace you're serving. I think that's so important, and for all of our audience as well. I'm sure they've got some good lessons to take away today.
Excellent, Keith. So we hopefully see you soon for another initiative like this and continue sharing about online education.
I hope so too, Jimena. Thank you for asking me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.